Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Our today's guest is Hashemian, an international English language teacher, a teacher trainer, and director of studies. With over 15 years of experience across Iran, Vietnam, and other countries, Hamid has worked with institutions such as the British Council, International House, and Cambridge Authorized Centers. He has trained thousands of teachers and learners, prepared candidates for major exams like IELTS, and regularly speaks at international conferences on teaching methodology and the role of technology in education. And today we'll talk about teacher development and what it really takes to sustain a career in this field. Hamid, thank you so much for being here with us.
First and foremost, I would like to send my heartfelt thanks to everyone and each of you. Thank you indeed for having me here. It's an absolute honor, my utmost pleasure to be sharing some thoughts, and that would be a great opportunity for all of us to reflect upon where we are moving forward. Okay, thank you indeed. I really literally appreciate that.
Sure, thank you. The pleasure is ours. Okay, so if you're ready, we'll just begin with the first question.
Okay, sure.
Cool. So, what was the turning point that made you decide to move forward from being a classroom teacher to a teacher trainer and then like a professional developer?
That's a very interesting question that I have probably been barely asked. And that would be a wonderful opportunity for me to personally reflect upon what I have been doing during the last 15 years. But I reckon that the turning point primarily emerged when I realized that my strongest professional contribution no longer lay merely in delivering just effective lessons, but in probably helping other teachers, educators, instructors understand why like certain practices worked, for instance, and how they could adapt them to their own contexts. Teachers are teaching, and they are probably forming a perception that in different contexts there would be one size fits all, but when they are probably thinking about teaching nationally, internationally, and moving forward, it's going to be quite a different story. After several years for me of intensive classroom teaching, or sometimes mentoring colleagues informally, not very formally, and even coordinating, let's say, some lesson observations, I noticed that, let's say, small pedagogical shifts made by teachers often led to, let's say, disproportionately large improvements in learner outcomes. And that was a kind of turning point in my life. Freeman, in one of his books, and very beautifully mentioned in 1989, this is what I would like to quote that would back up what I'm trying to say. And he said, teacher development is not about adding techniques, but about transforming understanding. And this kind of awareness coincided with my growing involvement in like curriculum coordination, observations, and even, let's say, some feedback cycles where I saw firsthand sustainable change in classroom that could depend heavily on developing teacher education, not just sharing techniques. This is the transition, let's say, moving from teaching to training environment as well. And that's highly rewarding career, in fact. And that's it. I hope that I did address your question.
Yes, that was amazing. A very complete explanation. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, being a non-native English speaker, especially someone who is from Iran, like how that actually influenced your approach to teaching and empathy with learners. Like, I'm also a non-native speaker, so I do understand some sides of it, but I wanted to hear it from you. And then because, well, you move forward teaching in like big companies, institutes and stuff, how was it for you?
Again, this is a kind of smashing type of or part of this career? And a wonderful question you're trying to throw at me that would give me some even food for thought in order to reflect and move forward. In fact, being a non-native speaker, or as an English teacher, let's say, it has fundamentally believed that shaped my instructional decisions and even my professional identity. By that, I mean I have experienced the language learning journey from the inside. For example, the fossilization, the, let's say, pronunciation insecurity sometimes, exam anxiety, and even the tension like between accuracy and fluency when you're trying to compare yourself with native speakers. And this experience definitely has enabled me to teach learning strategies explicitly rather than just assuming them that they are already, let's say, because they already possess this kind of language. Secondly, it has enabled me to normalize error as evidence of development. So it means, as a non-native speaker, I'm pretty certain all of us have undergone this or have gone through this experience making a mistake, which is absolutely not right. That's because every failure is one step closer to success. And it has also enabled me to, let's say, frame intelligibility and communicative effectiveness as priorities. And again, I would like to quote, because I've been preparing myself as well for this session, and I did try to gather some wonderful quotes that I've been reading during these decades. In 1994, there is a guy whose name is Metgius. In one of the articles, he believed that non-native teachers are often better placed to anticipate learner difficulties because they have already faced them themselves. And that's probably a merit to be a non-native speaker. I am in charge of recruiting teachers as well. And as a DOS, when we are going through the recruitment, I reckon that sometimes there might be a kind of, let's say, inclination towards some of my colleagues who'd like to prioritize or believe that the superiority would be found on native speakers. Well, while at the end of the day, when it comes to teaching, the non-native speakers are proving them wrong, and they're showcasing their incredible ability a lot more eloquently. So this is what I believe. And above all else, I believe that as a non-native teacher and non-native speaker, throughout the teaching and throughout the shift within this context, like teaching in Vietnam at the moment, it has cultivated deep pedagogical empathy on my side. And I understand that language learning is not merely cognitive, but even emotional and identity related. So design classroom activities or classrooms that are psychologically safe, students are feeling included, secure, and they are encouraged to take risks and without being judged, for instance, or without the fear of judgment.
Exactly. Totally agree. Totally. This is exactly the topic that we were talking in the last podcast. And well, interestingly, I was talking to a native English speaker, and she totally agreed that non-native English speakers can usually be even better teachers because, well, we went through all the ups and downs and like we went deep into learning. Like as a native speaker of Farsi myself, well, if it comes to teaching Farsi, I wouldn't be able to teach it well because I don't know everything about it. I just started and like learn.
All right, thank you. I literally appreciate that, dear Nasta. Okay.
So sure. Then, okay. So you run workshops internationally, right? You've run many workshops internationally. What is the most underrated professional skill that you think teachers need to develop?
That's a very critical question, at the same time interesting, broad as well. From my perspective, because I am dead certain that every single trainer or the ones who are involved in teacher training programs could, that would be the multiple types of perspectives that could come in handy and they would be able to share. But from where I stand, the most underrated professional skill would be like is diagnostic noticing. I mean, the capability of observing learning in real time, let's say, interpret that learning in very accurately and then try to respond pedagogically. So it is crucial to have this real-time learning and, let's say, having the ability to interpret it and then responding it pedagogically. So many teachers all around the world are trained to plan lessons like thoroughly, but fewer are trained to notice learner uptake or interactional breakdowns, or even, let's say, effective disengagement as they occur during the learning or teaching process. Yet, this skill differentiates, let's say, expert practitioners from competent ones. And again, I would like to quote Mr. Berliner in 2001. I have just taken a note, very beautifully pointed out that expert teachers differ from novices not in what they do, but in what they notice. Teachers who develop this skill can obviously adapt tasks. Like, that's why we have differentiation, the notion of differentiation, like teaching in a mixed ability classroom. They can reformulate input, they could adjust interaction patterns responsively and making learning far more effective than rigid adherence to lesson plans. That's exactly what springs up with regard to differentiation. When you're differentiating the content, the process, the product, the learning environment for the sake of better teaching, and that means you're adapting either the tasks up or adapting them down, and that's adaptive learning environment. That's it.
Cool, great. You give really complete answers, and that's awesome.
You're highly
Thank
welcome.
you so much. So, what is one practice that you think it's overhyped or even it's underutilized during like the workshops and courses that you had?
Okay. Again, a brilliant question. Overhyped. I believe that uncritical adoption of educational technology and AI tools. I came across a video on YouTube which was revolving around there are 10 types of people who must avoid AI tools. And one of them, the most crucial one, was the ones who don't have critical eyes. They have to stop using AI tools. So while these tools are powerful, they are often introduced as solutions without sufficient attention to pedagogical purpose, learner needs, and even cognitive load. These are three key elements or components. Again, pedagogical purposes, let's say learner needs, and cognitive load. So that's the main reason. Uncritical adoption of educational technology and AI tools, I reckon it has been overhyped during the last decade. And again, there was a nice article about in 2016, Selwyn mentioned that technology does not transform education, pedagogy does. I have recently attended an international conference here in Vietnam, and I was presenting there as well. And there was a wonderful and thought-provoking and very insightful presentation. And there was a guy who said that pedagogy first, technology second. So even with the emergence of AI, we have to still, let's say, be very cautious of the fact that pedagogy comes first. Just to wrap it up, the one specific skill that might have been underutilized, let's say, it's like evidence-formed reflective practice. We tend to run workshop professional developments raising the learners, teachers' awareness or educators' awareness concerning the application of reflection. I reckon that it has been underutilized. Reflection is often encouraged, but rarely structured around, let's say, concrete data such as learner output or classroom recordings or discourse analysis. And reflection without evidence risks reinforcing assumptions rather than challenging them. This is probably the most neglected area, I believe. Let's say it could be put down to several reasons. Like in Vietnam, to be perfectly honest, let me give you a very prime example. The vast majority of teachers are leading a very hectic lifestyle. So running one class, the second, the third. So they have a lot on their plate. Sometimes I personally feel that I'm snowed under. So as a result, it's going to be a lot more challenging to sometimes be very idealistic. But still, if you start from small, you can still, make huge progress.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, well, in your experience teaching different ages, like teenagers, adults, and all, what is the most common barrier that the learners actually face? Like, well, there are many of them. So, could you please tell us about a few of them? And also, how would you help them to overcome?
Okay, a brilliant question. This is exactly the area of my expertise, and I am daft about such a kind of topic, which is again the notion of mixed ability classes, heterogeneous classes, and differentiation, specifically with the level of diversity in your classroom. So, across the age groups and proficiency levels, there are probably three or four barriers that consistently emerge. For example, the fear of negative evaluation or limited learner autonomy, although we believe that we are providing students with ample opportunity to become more autonomous in learning. Maybe that's a limited learner autonomy that we tend to face. And overemphasis on form at the expense of meaning. Why
Mhm.
am I telling this? Because one of some of the most recent research that I slept on, we're talking about even Rod Ellis or the most renowned key LT figures mentioned that like when it comes to teaching a target language, you might have noticed the majority of textbooks are putting more emphasis on clarification of form, for instance, rather meaning. And in order to effectively address these specific problematic issues would be like you could build a much more safe environment, I mean psychologically, where errors are reframed as learning opportunities. So it's crucial for professional teacher to convert those mistakes into the chance for learners to learn from the mistakes. Even for the sake of limited learner autonomy, we could go for scaffold, let's say, autonomy gradually through guided choice and reflective tasks, providing students with the golden opportunity of finding out how much progress is taking place. There is an incredible and amazing PDF file, if you like, I can share with you and the audience as well. It's
That would be
exactly it's exactly about how to teach, let's say, mixed ability classes when there is a huge level of diversity amongst learners. And that would be like how to know your learners and how to try to put them in different pairs every other session based on their language proficiency, based on how much they are taking risks. And that's another amazing idea that just I was just trying to come up with. And finally, teach language as meaning and use, embedded in context and purpose. So meaning in use probably has been the most neglected area. Form is mainly at the top. And again, in 1986, there is an article by Horwitz who mentioned that language anxiety is not a learner problem. It is a classroom design issue. Probably we teachers have to reflect upon what is taking place in every single second. If students start turning into each other and talk to each other, is my lesson engaging enough? Did I allocate a certain amount of time in order to adapt this part of the book, or adapt it down, or adapt it up? Because there are students with diverse learner needs and stuff.
Mhm. And okay, so now that we are going through teaching online and also offline, which is a lot more common, I think, after COVID, what is one meaningful engagement that we can add to our virtual classrooms?
A very technical, critical, brilliant question. So, specifically, when we are considering some cultures, like in Southeast of Asia and West part of Asia, the most I reckon, which can be pervasively found in every single online synchronous session, would be like when the camera's off. It was just a kind of example I was trying to say, but I reckon that meaningful online engagement is not about entertainment, but it's more about we can say intentional task design. Even if you're teaching nationally, internationally, or regionally, and interaction density. So it's crucial to find out in an online synchronous environment, whether we are teaching synchronously or asynchronously, how much intentional task design and interaction density can take place. Teachers must move far beyond long teacher fronted input and design lessons where participation is just essential rather than optional. Do you see? And some
Mhm.
effective strategies that we could probably include, like short input cycles followed by immediate application. It's crucial that when we are delivering a lesson online to take it into account. Or we have to clearly define some task outcomes and accountability. By task outcome, it means it should be like smart. Everybody knows the smart choice. The smart, it means it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, and time bound. And the purposeful breakout room roles, even reporting tasks. These are the moments that we are converting pair work, group work activities in an in-person session into an online synchronous session. So again, we are trying to deal with like breakout room and using different tools. And I reckon that a professional teacher has to keep himself, herself up to
Mhm.
date every single day in this world that you're going through accelerated change, this overwhelming complexity, and this tremendous competition. It's absolutely vital to keep us up to date in order to apply, because we all teachers tend to attend workshops. I've been attending numerous events, ELT events across the globe, specifically in the Southeast West part of Asia, in person and online webinars offered by many reputable organizations. We are trying tremendously to fill our toolbox with lots of tools. And
Mhm.
that would definitely come in handy to be able to utilize them more effectively. And again, there is a nice quote I did come up with, and I wrote from Dylan William, who believes that engagement is not about how busy students appear, but how cognitively involved they are. And online pedagogy, I reckon, that demands greater intentionality, not just simply
Mhm.
transferring face-to-face practices to digital platforms.
Okay. So you said that all about the group classrooms, right?
Mhm.
What if we have private sessions?
In private session, I reckon that it's going to be a lot more convenient. Why? Because you're just dealing with one person. There is a very beautiful and amazing quote from Penny who wrote the book like 100 Teaching Tips and several books in terms of teaching mixed ability. The moment you start having more than one student, it converts or it turns into a mixed ability classroom. Bear in mind that when you're teaching one to one, you are still going to take into account the pedagogical aspects of teaching, but the way that you're going to convey your message is going to be a lot more, let's say, convenient. Why? Because you are dealing only with one student. You have to psychologically, let's say, in terms of cultural aspects concerning the socioeconomical aspect, you know how to deal with one specific person. So it's going to be a lot more convenient based on my experience as well, since I've been teaching online since 2020 with the emergence of that unprecedented phenomenon, which was COVID-19, for 5 consecutive years now. I tend to run one-to-one sessions, and I see that the let's say the way that we are trying to address is entirely different when we're dealing with 10 students online and asking everybody to turn on your webcam, asking everybody to move to the breakout room and collaborate. Well, in that way, you're going to be a lot more convenient. You're doing it only with one person. However, you're still going to keep it highly engaging, maximizing the level of engagement between yourself and the designated participant or student in your classroom.
Thank you. I really do enjoy while you're speaking and explaining the whole thing. Like you go through all the aspects. So thank you.
You're highly welcome.
Okay. As an IELTS mock examiner, what patterns of mistake do you see the most? And what is like the practical advice that you have for the candidates?
Well, brilliant, fantastic, thank you. Such a brilliant question. First and foremost, I reckon that the most frequent pattern, like let me talk about my context as I've been teaching primarily predominantly in Vietnam, Southeast of Asia, with some other countries, Korea, Japan, China, some very few students from Spain, Qatar, the rest of the world, but predominantly in Vietnam. The most frequent patterns include memorized responses that
Mm.
limit interactional flexibility. So examiners would immediately realize whether you are spontaneously expressing your thoughts or no. Or sometimes there is a wrong perception that the vast majority of IELTS test takers would form, like overuse of complex grammar that might lead to breakdown in clarity. So, overuse of complex grammar. What is your name? I shall tell
He
you
named.
is in accordance with my mother's intention. What is your name? Well, I've got a quite long name, but a circle of my amazing friends would put it into a nutshell and call me Hamid. Are we literally communicating in this way? It's crucial to raise the IELTS candidates' awareness that, my friend, the IELTS exam, in particular, the speaking, which is a productive skill, is only a normal conversation between you and the person who is at probably most probably a native speaker or has the language level of proficiency at 9 level. And there will be part one, part two, part three. And the transitional movement means in part one, you're answering some questions, personal stuff. Part two, focusing on one topic, which is a long term to showcase your ability. And part three, a little bit more abstract ideas, and the questions are going to fall into several categories. Anyway, I said memorize responses, let's say overuse of complex grammatical structures, and sometimes weak discourse organization affecting coherence, the way that they're moving, or how to use transitional phrases moving from point A to B, B to C, C to D. And in order to practically address these, let's say, issues, we have to let them know that it's crucial to prioritize clarity over complexity. What I'm trying to do in my classes, I have come across a students who might say, teacher, I have been spending or I have been dedicating a large proportion of my time learning hundreds of idioms. And I would probably ask them, okay, if somebody asks you a question like, how are you today? Are you going to say, well, it has been raining cats and dogs since early morning. That's the main reason I am feeling down in the dumps. And as I am a type of person and a person who catches the worm, like a bird who catches the worm, do we literally respond questions like this using 3, 4, or embedding 4 idioms in answering such a simple question? It's crucial to develop ideas naturally rather than just artificially extending them. And finally, practice speaking to communicate, not to impress. Practice speaking to communicate, not necessarily to impress. And I believe fluency is not just speed, it is the ability to maintain meaning without unnecessary hesitation. So it's going to be definitely the way that we could address these
Yeah.
issues.
And the things that you just mentioned, I think they are rooted in maybe the way that they learn it. And unfortunately, maybe some of the teachers must be like, I don't know, counted for those mistakes because, well, for those memorized things that you just mentioned, it's just, well, I saw and I've had students that they said, like, my teacher asked me to like memorize these things. And I'm always like, learning is not about memorizing things, it's just about learning them and try to use them in your real life situations. It's not like how to memorize the things and say them exactly word by word, letter by letter. And the other thing that you just mentioned, overuse of like grammar and like difficult vocabulary and stuff. Again, unfortunately, we've seen many teachers through internet, especially Instagram, that are like, don't say this, say that. And that gives those students who are not really, I don't know, maybe searching or they don't have enough information, thinking that, okay, they must be true. Well, I've been hearing it all over internet, so that probably should be true. But we know that it's not. Like when you're like moving to different countries and stuff, when you hear people speaking, it's totally different than what you're learning from books and stuff. So I totally understand what you were just mentioning. And I think one part of it, like the mistake is on teachers, not all of them, some. And then it's lack of maybe information from the students.
Definitely see eye to eye with what you have just pointed out. And I would like to reiterate the fact that the lack of awareness might be the main reason. You're right.
Exactly. So, well, we know that as teachers, we all are so human. So we also, it happens to us that we lose our spark of teaching over time. So what was the thing that helped you stay motivated and like just keep going?
I would like to begin responding this question with two or three quotes. I am a type of person who has got a very dynamic lifestyle. I tend to have my own routines, like spending time at gym every other day or every day, depending largely on depending to a large degree on my schedule. And I keep listening to a lot of podcasts, motivational speakers, and I'm trying to quote some of them. Les Brown, who is a great and an inspiring man, very beautifully said like that life is full of ups and downs, but we can grow, we can thrive through the down moments. And I try to make an analogy that it's exactly the same as teaching. Teaching is also full of ups and downs. Our career is full of ups and downs, but we can learn through the down moments. If I'm getting to the classroom where there are hyperactive students, I have to start reflecting upon how I could address this issue. If I'm teaching a classroom which is full of perfect students, I will not necessarily grow. So this is the side that I have been always deeply interested in. So there are probably three principles that have sustained my motivation. Like number one, it was purpose over perfection. It means focusing on growth rather than flawlessness. I am always trying to grow, learn from each other, and it's crucial to work on yourself that not possessing or not having that ego of the if I have achieved this or if I've got these brilliant achievement, it means I am and that's enough. No, there is still room for improvement. There is still a lot to cover. The other one would be like professional community, learning with and even from reflective practitioners. I have been attending thousands of webinars, conferences, and ELT events. I have been in touch with some incredible and highly inspiring professionals, such as Alan Davenport, a great friend of mine, Anna Hasper, Matthew, the ones who are in charge of running professional developments, writing books, writing articles, keep reading, and being in touch with the ones who are definitely going to, let's say, help me to a great deal to reflect upon my life socially, emotionally, even financially, the way that they can contribute, and the way that I can contribute to the society that I'm living. And finally, like some boundaries, like recognizing that exhaustion is not necessarily synonymous with commitment. You are absolutely right. We might be overloaded, let's say, in terms of, let's say, emotionally, mentally. But at the end of the day, I believe that exhaustion is totally different from commitment. So I would probably give myself some time to unwind. And again, there is a very nice quote that I wrote. I would like to read it here. It says, burnout is not caused by caring too much, but by caring without support or limits. And that
Mhm.
definitely resonates with me. And sustainable teaching, I believe, requires self compassion and professional agency, not just
Mhm.
constant self sacrifice. Sometimes we forget that if we just sacrifice, it's not going to happen in that way.
So, thank you so much. Due to lack of time, I just need to combine my two last questions. If you could design a dream global teacher training, how would it be? And aside that, if you weren't allowed to teach anymore or to train anymore, what part of it would you miss the most?
Okay, so you're definitely making it a lot more challenging for me to put them all together. But to be very brief and concise, as we are pressed for time, my ideal program for the sake of teaching, let's say, designing a kind of teacher training with unlimited resources for the globally that could be addressed or universally, probably I would think of something long term rather than just event based or practice embedded rather than theory heavy. I've been running a lot of professional developments, even as a director of studies in my school currently. Whenever I'm running professional developments 3, 4 times per school year, I have realized, and I know that my teachers are already occupied. They're showing up for 90 minutes or 3 hours, and they are already, let's say, highly occupied with their own life, in their own tasks, and let's say a lot of assignment and stuff. And it's crucial as a practitioner to provide them with more practical ideas rather than a lot of theories. So the majority of participants who attended my sessions would say my sessions are more likely to be 80-70% practical oriented or practice oriented rather than just theory oriented. And my teacher training that I would design would be more of a mentoring program, like mentored rather than just evaluative. And I would try to consider the cross-cultural classroom observations, for instance, the coaching cycles, or with trained mentors as well. And that's it. And in order to address your final question, the toughest part or the hardest part would be, you're asking what if I were not allowed to teach or train. I believe that the toughest part would be like witnessing a transformation, seeing a hesitant like learner speak with confidence for the first time, for instance, or a teacher who might realize that they are capable of far more than they believe in themselves. And I reckon at the end of the day, like teaching and teacher education are not merely professional roles for me. They are definitely how I understand growth, how I understand resilience above all else, and the human potential. And that's it. There is again another amazing quote that I wrote, and I think it's better to read it. And teaching is not just profession; it is a way of seeing possibility. This is what I certainly believe. And just all in all, there is a beautiful and very insightful quote from Mr. Jim Rohn. He said that don't just ask for security, ask for adventure. It's a lot better to live 30 years full of adventure than 100 years safe in the corner. It's not important how long you live. What's important is how you live. And that's the main reason I am a type of person who does have a kind of adventurous lifestyle mindset, and I tend to take a lot of risks. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And that's the main reason I'm trying to attend several courses, learning every day. And maybe this part is interesting, or it might be a little bit interesting for the audience. You might not believe, but I have spent more than 20,000 US dollar during the last decade on my professional development, on growing myself, and on learning and attending thousands of courses, or taking an airplane, flying and stuff.
Beautiful. Thank you. I
Yeah, I
think
know.
that is like the best place to stop. And you've explained everything so complete, and it was really awesome. I learned a lot, and I'm really happy that we had this chance to talk together. And thank you for the conversation and sharing things with us. And for those who are listening to this podcast, thank you all for spending your time with us. Anything else you'd like to mention?
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, TalentHut team, Mr. Shakawat, if I'm not mistaken, and you, dear Nasser, for the wonderful questions. I began to fall in love with the questions the moment that they have been already sent to me, to prepare and reflect upon them. Some of the questions I have never thought about, and that's a brilliant opportunity for me as well to reflect constantly upon them and see that how we could move forward. I hope that the audience and the
Honestly try to ask the questions that I have myself. So probably there are like the questions for other people's as well, for others as well. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that, by the way.
all right.
So okay, cool. Have a great day, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time and take care. Good one.